Boys and girls, let's talk about Pantera. Let's talk about Dimebag and his legendary guitar tone. You know why? Because I think I just nailed his guitar tone today. And I did that by only using one plugin and one IR. So if you like his guitar tone on Vulgar Display of Power, this video is for you. And you better keep on watching because you're basically just one click away from that tone. So we are continuing our journey into unusual and unique guitar tones with this video. But before I start talking about Dimebag, his guitar tone, before I show you how I got there, let's just have a listen. Sounds great, right? If you don't want to wait, if you don't want to hear me talking, if you just want to get that tone, click the first link in the description. If you click that link and buy the plugin, it includes two presets, two Kristian Kohle presets, including my custom IRs. And that is 100% the tone you just heard. All right. Dimebag. That guy is nothing less than a modern metal legend, if you ask me. He has inspired a whole generation, at least a whole generation of riff makers. He has inspired a lot of people to either start listening to metal or to start playing guitar. And I think that is because his attitude, his playing, his riffs, and his guitar tone were a perfect match. They were sending a message that was very, very attractive to a lot of people back then. And for me, that guy is one of the symbols of the rebellious feel that metal used to have back in the 90s. Just look at how he lived, how he played guitar, how he performed, and how he unfortunately passed away. It is all 120% rock and roll, you know? It's like sending a huge fuck you message to everybody. And that was just very, very attractive and very consistent. Anything that guy did was metal. He created some of the most punishing, some of the most heavy riffs ever. Just take that riff from Walk. Everybody knows that riff. One of the most famous riffs ever. It has become one of the sonic memes of metal, if you ask me. Let's talk about that riff, because that riff and the Dimebag guitar tone on that record were, once again, a perfect match. So if you analyze that riff, this is the most unmelodic thing you can play. So it's the biggest fuck off to anything melodic. It is extremely chromatic. It's even in between semitones or even more than chromatic. And there's no melodic movement at all. Just that little bending and yeah, 2.5 notes, so to say. And then you have that pause on the one and that impact on the two. That makes the whole thing like pump and gives it that marching feel that makes it so fucking heavy. So that riff just makes you want to break things. It just makes you want to break things positively, okay? That riff has a message. It says no to anything beautiful, to anything sweet. And here we can start talking about the guitar tone, because the guitar tone is kind of doing the same thing. Let's analyze that guitar tone. So if you've been watching my videos, you might have learned already that I believe there are two main parameters that define a guitar tone. One is the type of distortion, mainly defined, of course, by the amp or by the pedal you're using, whatever is distorting your tone. And the second parameter is the frequency spectrum, and that is mostly defined by the cabinet, the speakers, and the microphone, and maybe additionally by some EQs, but mainly by the cab. Let's talk about the frequency spectrum of that tone first. It's a typical 90s tone, so it's the same idea again. Let's get rid of any frequency that might sound beautiful. Let's scoop the mids. Let's carve out anything beautiful in there. And just leave the stuff that sounds nasty and savage. Just leave some piercing highs, just leave some lows, and take out anything that might make my guitar tone sound vocal and nice and beautiful. So the guitar tone once again has the same message, like the riff itself. And this frequency spectrum is very different from what we are used today. Today we are looking for a more sophisticated tone and for a more linear frequency range. Or if you look at the gent people, or if you look at people who like HM2 tones, they are looking for even more mids. But back then in the 90s, mids were not metal. So you were scooping out as much as you could. And you know that cliche, just talk to any non-metal guitarist, to a blues or fusion or rock guitarist that hates metal tones. He's probably thinking about exactly that tone. And he will tell you, oh my God, you know, there's no soul, there's no tone, there's no mids. That's like, it sounds extremely cheap and wrong. But that was, yeah, what metal sounded like back in the days. Mids were not metal. So sometimes less is more. Shut up. And this is just one of the reasons why this tone is not modern at all. So let's talk about the second parameter, the distortion itself. We all know that Dimebag used those Randall transistor amps that I think nobody else was really using. I think Crowbar used them at some point, but that was nothing typical back then. But people were using transistor distortion a lot, and that meant they were using pedals. And again, those pedals are sending the same message. The reason for using pedals was they were cheaper, one thing, but they very often had more gain than the amps, and they sounded tighter than the amps. More gain means more metal, right?
Simple logic.
The second reason was many of those pedals, just think about the metal zone, had active EQs that were a lot more powerful than the passive EQs on the tube amps. So remember, to get rid of those mids and to boost the lows and the highs, those pedals were a lot more effective. If you listen to a metal zone pedal, or if you listen to most of the old school transistor distortions, they just sound kind of cheap and kind of flat. Same thing with those Randall amps. So today most people are preferring something more sophisticated. Playing those pedals very often just feels like, I don't know, like hitting the roof, you know, like you know, a tube amp is just more elastic and not that limited and not that undynamic in the distortion, if you know what I mean. So, but back then, remember the message. It was not about sounding beautiful. It was not about sounding nice. I think that is one of the reasons why Dimebag ended up playing a transistor amp, because it was tight, it had a lot of gain, and it was supporting the message of sounding evil and fucking brutal once again. So this was a lot of theory, but let me sum it up. You know, if you are being consistent as a guitar player with your message, with the message of the riffs, of the music, of the band, and make that work with your guitar tone, you're a winner. That's how it works. So Pantera was never about sounding beautiful. And I actually believe that guitar tone is not beautiful. It's not nice. And it's not my favorite guitar tone, but I still love it because it has that simple message that supports the riffs of that guy. And that makes it fantastic. So let's have another listen, and then I show you the gear I'm using. Let's try to nail that tone. For me, it's not important to use the original Dimebag gear. I haven't even Googled what he used, which cab he was playing or something. I don't care. I just try to find a tone like that my own way. The first thing I did was I was trying to get that distortion with a metal zone pedal and plugin, and that didn't really work. But then I found another plugin from an Italian company called AUDIORITY. And that plugin is emulating 2 Randall amps. So that seemed to be perfect. It's called Celestion Randy. And by the way, those guys from AUDIORITY, they are also making an HM2 plugin. And if you don't have the money to buy a GRINDSTEIN pedal, and you want that HM2 tone, I think this is the most versatile thing you can buy. And instead of buying a vintage HM2 pedal or any of the boring clones, you better go for that plugin. It's actually really good. But that's not important for this video. I'll put a link down there to the HM2 plugin. So let's have a look at Randy. So plugin looks like this, and it's emulating 2 amps, and it's doing a really good job. Let's just start with the RG150. I actually used to own this amp. I bought this amp like 20 years ago because it was cheap and I wanted to own more amps, and I tried to get that Dimebag tone, but it never really worked for me. It sounds like this. That really sounds like the hardware. But it sounds more like a metal zone in an amp or something. But they also modeled another one, and that one is called RG100, and I think that's the one he was actually playing. You can see it here. Let's get rid of that reverb first. The only thing I don't like about the plugin, it's pretty small. Or I just missed a feature to resize the window. I don't know. But the cool thing about the plugin is you can do a lot. So you have a preamp EQ, graphic and parametric. We're going to use that one. You have a noise gate. Not going to use that one. You have a boost, important. The actual amp. Another EQ. Let's turn it off. After the amp. And finally, an IR loader. Talking about the IR loader, when you are searching for new tones, make sure you don't have too many unknown parts in your equation. Is that what you call it? So I always start, if I use a new amp or a new amp plugin, I prefer using my own IRs, so I know where I am. Don't get me wrong, the IRs are cool in this plugin, but let me just turn them off. And instead, because we're going for a very bright tone with a lot of high-end sizzle, I will use one of my own IRs, and I will use the brightest one from my EMINENCE IR pack, which is the Rattlesnake Kiss. And that is 2 EMINENCE speakers mixed together. Of course, you can get my EMINENCE pack. There's a link in the description. Okay, so let's try to dial in something here. Let's check out the amp. So let's go to the high gain channel, crank the gain, and then there's another sustain knob. And I can already tell it's the right kind of distortion. Not tight enough in the lows. And we don't have enough distortion, so let's just use the boost. I don't know what this is, seems to be some kind of Sag Wild boost pedal, whatever, but it works. Getting closer. Let's tweak the EQ of the amp a little bit, so we don't want those mids. More highs. Presence. The presence knob is not really doing much. It's more like an on-off switch. And let's try to get the bass under control with those passive pickups. It could be a bit tighter, so let's go to the pre-EQ and remove some low end here. That's a good trick to make your palm mutes tighter. and before. So reducing the lows before you hit the amp sounds like a presence boost a little bit. Okay, let's tweak the output EQ. V-shape. I can hear that it's the wrong speaker, but distortion-wise, we're getting there. Sounds really 90s already. I can hear we need another speaker, and I'm sure you guys remember my impulse response making video, where I was testing some 3 rather unique and unknown speakers. One of them was the FANE F70, and back then I said something like, wow, this sounds like a Pantera tone, and I remembered that. So I went back to that cab, mic'd it again, and tried to find a cool combination that sounds closer to that old school 90s Dimebag tone. I'm still playing the plugin, but through a power amp. Which power amp did I choose? What do you think? So I was looking for something really scooped and really bright, with a lot of rattle and sizzle. Yes! So I took the rectifier, you can see it over there. I'm going straight into the power amp of the rectifier, into a Marshall cab, not an oversized cab, a Marshall cab loaded with 3 different speakers. The interesting speaker is the FANE F70. Let's do that now. I'll turn off the IR and I route the signal from the plugin into the rectifier's power amp, into that Marshall cab with those 3 different speakers, and back into the computer. This is what the FANE speaker sounds like. Much better, right? Too much nice sounding mids still, and perhaps a little too modern. And that's why I added another speaker that makes everything sound a little more 90s, and that is the K100. Together they sound like this. The K100 is not a bright sounding speaker, but combined with the FANE speaker, it just gets brighter and more aggressive. I like that. So, next thing, and the final move I did, was to add some EQ. I was listening to the original Dimebag tone, which sounds like this. And I was like, oh my god, we need a lot more in there, and we need less of those mids. So I added an EQ and used 4 bands of EQs. You can see them here. Some bass. Then I scooped out the region around 300, 33. We don't want that. Then I felt like it still sounded a little hard around 2K. And I boosted the sizzle, something you normally would get rid of. But listen to a Vulgar Display of Power, there's a lot of in there. Nice! The next step was to create an impulse response, an IR, of that speaker combination, including the EQ. Let's do that now. And I ended up with 2 different IRs. One that was even more scooped and brighter and has slightly different settings on the amp. And then another one that sounds a little more modern and a little more normal, so to say. I just ended up with 2 presets called Kohle Rantera and Kohle Rantera Modern. Check them out. You'll find them in the plugin. Let's just load one of those presets and compare it with the original Dimebag tone. Dimebag and me. Dimebag That's pretty close. Two things you want to do, depending on which guitar you play, you should tweak the EQ on the input here. If you play passive pickups, you might want to get rid of some of the lows here. If you play EMGs or any tighter sounding active pickups, you might not need that. You will see this is a really, really bright tone. So it is recommended to try the low pass filter here. You see, I've set it to 10K already. I just left the sizzle in there, but you can tame it with that low pass filter. The more you get rid of it, the less Dimebag it sounds, but it gets a little more normal and usable. Alright, so let's have another listen to my little example. All you are hearing is the preset from the plugin. There's no processing on the guitars. I was using this guitar, which is a Yamaha guitar with a Seymour Duncan Jeff Beck pickup, and I think it sounds really fucking close to the original. Check it out one more time. So if you want to get that tone, exactly that tone, all you have to do is you click the first link and get that plugin. And if you click that link, it includes two presets. Those two presets from me, including my IRs. So it's pretty much plug and play. If you want to play Dimebag today, here's your chance. Click that link. Enjoy. Alright everybody, that was my way of paying respect to Dimebag and to Pantera. Yeah, get that plugin, enjoy that tone. It's pretty unusual, and as you know, I enjoy trying things that sound a little different. If there's something you want to see or you want me to try, let me know in the comments. As usual, I want you to subscribe to this channel and to ring the ding dong bell. I want you to subscribe to my email list. Because, you know, I'm sometimes doing private videos, and that's a good way of getting in touch with me. Here are my socials, as usual. And if you get that plugin, let me know how it works for you. That would be interesting. Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much. See you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.